chanting together. That actually, when we met in Debbie's garden, whenever that was, and we did a service, the chanting together was what I realized I missed as much as anything. Just, it kind of makes me cry. Just what it is to feel each other's body, and for us and for you to hear this group chant. I also just want to acknowledge here, we're getting used to new sounds. There's cars out there. There's cars out there, guys. And not only that, I just have to share it with you, there's a baseball field out there, which we almost rented a place right next to the baseball field. And I have been sitting here congratulating myself that we didn't get that place, because we can hear it here, but it's over there. So I am so grateful that we're studying Thich Nhat Hanh during this time. Thich Nhat Hanh says things that maybe I wouldn't be brave enough to say. Maybe we're all thinking someplace inside of ourselves. Can you guys hear me? You okay? Okay. I mean, of course, there are good guys and bad guys in this. There are sides, and we all have a sense of which side we're on. And everybody's getting hurt. The whole world's being hurt. So as practitioners, let's just keep working with the quality of our hearts and our thoughts, and really, really, really hope that the Ukrainian people are safe with our whole hearts. And I'm so glad we have Thich Nhat Hanh, who says, listen deeply for peace. It's so easy when things get escalated to listen for war. And you can feel it. I've worked with veterans. I've worked with combat veterans. Nobody wins. So I found, this is from Creating True Peace by Thich Nhat Hanh, and I edited it a lot. But I'm just gonna read parts of it and do some commentary, and let's just let Thich Nhat Hanh, who knows the worst of it, whose voice comes to us from the hard-won knowledge of work with peace in your own hearts, no matter what's happening. So I love this little introduction. I didn't know this. I've been saying this, that because Vietnamese Zen Vietnam is right in between the Mahayana countries and the Theravadan countries. So it's a unique kind of Zen. I also want to welcome new people here. It's really sweet to have you. And old people. And young people. And everybody. But anyway. So because the tradition that I'm more trained in, and some of us are more trained in, is Zen, that's what we're familiar with. So of course, it's like anything, is you think, well, that's the way you do it, you know? It's like depending on what Christian tradition or whether you grew up as a Muslim or whatever you grew up as, you think, well, that's the way you do it. Well, Thich Nhat Hanh tells us that gee, even Zen has different ways of doing it. So I want to describe this because I like this. A traditional Vietnamese Zen garden is very different from a Japanese Zen garden. Did you know that? I didn't know that. We already know something new. Our Zen gardens, called Hon Nom Bo, are wild and exuberant. Ooh, more playful than the formal Japanese gardens with their restrained patterns. I mean, we're used to the rock gardens that are so beautiful and raked, and I mean, I love them as much, but they're exuberant and wild. That's actually more my school. Vietnamese Zen gardens are seriously unserious. For us, the whole world is contained in this peaceful place. All activities of life unfold in true peace in the garden. In one part, children will be playing, and in another, some elderly men will be having a chess game. Couples are walking. Families are having picnics. Animals are free to wander around. Shall we institute this? I'm all in. Beautiful trees are growing next to abundant grasses and flowers. There is water and there are rock formations. All ecologies are represented in this one microecology without discrimination. It is a miniature peaceful world. It is a beautiful living metaphor for what a new global ethic could bring. War is not a necessary condition of life. The root of war, as with all conflicts, is ignorance. Ignorance of the inherent goodness, the Buddha nature in every human being. I'm going to say that again. Ignorance of the inherent goodness in every human being. In each one of us, even at our worst, and all those other people we think out there are doing these things. The inherent goodness, the Buddha, watering the Buddha in each person and in ourselves. That's our job. That's a bodhisattva's job. You think there's nothing to do? Well, it may not look noble or heroic. You may not get to storm bastions or whatever it is that mostly young people, I was going to say young men, but I thought, let's focus on inherent goodness. The potential for ignorance lives in all of us. Dogen said, someone who is enlightened, a Buddha, knows they're deluded. This is not about getting over being deluded. This is about being aware that we're deluded. With clarity and goodness and compassion, and using it to wake up and to help ourselves and everybody else. Ignorance gives rise to misunderstanding, which can lead to violent thoughts and behavior. And although ignorance and violence may not have manifested in your life, when conditions are sufficient, they can. We really need to know that and study that. To really find the roots inside ourselves that could do, who knows what we could do if our family was threatened. I feel really, really humble, and we should all feel really, really humble. And keep focusing on inherent goodness and watering the seeds. And then maybe if we're backed into a corner, I remember Richard Baker, my first teacher, said, everybody's nice till they're backed into a corner. I think of that a lot. Pay attention when you get backed into a corner in some small way. That's a really important moment to study. We have to be very careful not to water the seeds of ignorance and not to allow them to develop roots and grow into arrows. Do you know the story of that when Buddha was sitting under the Bodhi tree and had touched the earth and said, I vow not to move. I'm going to wake up with and for all beings. And the earth shook, and like a joyful woman, sometimes it says. Wow, somebody finally is sitting down. I'm going to sit down in the midst of causes and conditions and breathe peace and awakening. And Mara, who in Buddhism is the bad guy or the devil or the bad being or whoever, started shooting all these arrows at the Buddha, because Mara always knows exactly where to shoot the arrows. Have you ever noticed that? That if you want to get backed into a corner, that somehow life knows exactly what you need to back you into a corner. And then mostly we think we did something wrong or something's wrong, but in fact, you could say, thank you. Wow, I just found where the arrow hit. I'll study this with and for all beings. But the story is, and I have a picture of it actually. Maybe I'll bring it. She's a Dakini. Well, she's not a Dakini. This is funny having to look down and up and train myself. She's an active, wrathful manifestation of Kuan Yin. And she's dancing in the flames and on ignorance. And she has a bow and arrow, and she's shooting roses and rose petals, because the story is that the Buddha, when Mara shot the arrows at him, trying to get him to move, they just dissolved and turned into rose petals. I love these stories. Okay, so back to Thich Nhat Hanh. When one country attacks another, it is out of great fear. Study the fear and a kind of collective ignorance. We know when we look deeply that happiness does not come from possessing something or someone. It comes from kindness and compassion, from helping to ease suffering. All violence is injustice. We should not inflict that injustice on ourselves or on other people. Remember, there are no winners. I have to say, it breaks my heart that people are backed against the wall and that really good people are making Molotov cocktails to protect themselves. There's just nothing in any of these pictures that's not heartbreaking. And they're not pictures, they're real people. As long as we allow hatred to grow in us, we continue to make ourselves and others suffer. As we look deeply at the wars in our recent history, we have to transform our hatred and misunderstanding into compassion. We have to recognize that those who have made us suffer are also victims. I would like to say right here, I have no idea that anybody should be doing anything. I don't know what to do. Do you know what to do? I don't know what I'd say. I don't know. But to look deeply and to ask deeply, to really watch how our minds want to divide. How can we as individuals influence the collective consciousness of our nations and move in the direction of peace? We do this by uprooting the roots of violence and war within ourselves. To prevent war, we cultivate nonviolence. We practice mindfulness in our daily life so that we can recognize and transform the poisons within us and our nation and in other nations. When we practice nonviolence in our daily life, we see the positive effects on our families, society, and government. How do you express your deepest heart's desire when you're washing the dishes? How do we express our deepest heart's desire for peace when you're walking from one room to another? How do we express our deepest desire for peace and love and compassion in relationship with the person next to us and with our partners, who we can completely love, and then all of a sudden you can just watch it. It's like, or somebody in the grocery store line. It's like, you don't have to be in a war zone to practice this stuff. This is the work of it. This is what we're doing. And I deeply, deeply, and I know Thich Nhat Hanh does too, and I know you do too. We all know on a deep, visceral level how profoundly interconnected we all are. That as we practice this in our own homes and in our own, I was going to say villages, in our own towns, as we help each other, it does affect the whole world. I deeply, deeply believe that. Although you wouldn't always notice it when I start acting out, because I can forget as fast as you guys can, probably. Maybe you don't forget, but I forget. And then I remember, as I think, oh, this is suffering. Come back, come back. Okay. He talks about at Plum Village, they had a 2-week retreat, and they invited people from Palestine and Israel, and they all practiced together. And what happened over the course of 2 weeks of living together, of listening to each other. Let me see. They followed the basic practice to do everything mindfully. We established ourselves in the here and now in order to touch life deeply. We practiced mindfulness while we breathed and walked and talked and brushed our teeth and chopped vegetables for meals and washed dishes. That is the basic daily practice that we all did together. And we all offered each other support. And we sat with each other and we listened deeply. We learned to speak in such a way that we could hear each other and understand and accept. Do you ever think that communication, the root word of communication, it shares it with communion? I think how often do we talk to each other, or we talk at each other, or we talk not to really, it's like, I don't really want to hear you. I just want to tell you what I think. And it's really disturbing when the other person doesn't think the same thing. And we're like in these kind of zones as opposed to this kind of zones. Is what if we really vowed that we wanted to really listen to each other and give each other that gift? In this situation, they all had a chance to speak of their fear and their anger and their hatred and despair. And many felt for the first time that they were listened to and that they were being understood, which relieved a lot of suffering within them and within everyone. We listened deeply, opening our hearts with the intention to help them express and heal. Brought a lot of joy. And what began to arise is the awareness that the world is beautiful. It's hard these days, these beautiful, at least here, it's spring days. I don't know what it's like for some of you and all the different places where you are. Even if it's snowy days, snow is amazing. The world is so beautiful. And it's also heartbreaking. But you don't have to choose one or the other. That's practice. The wonders of life is available every day. During the war in Vietnam, young people came up to me, Thich Nhat Hanh, and asked, "Do you think there will be an end to war?" I could not answer them right away. I practiced mindful breathing in and out. And after a long time, I looked at them and I said, my dear friends, the Buddha said everything is impermanent, including war. This part's called true peace negotiations. If we have not transformed our inner suffering, hatred and fear, it will prevent us from communicating, understanding, and making peace. Always comes right back here. It is important not to be in a hurry to reach conclusions or an agreement about what to do for peace to be possible. There's a lot of pushing right now in the world. We should do this, we should do that, because it's so uncomfortable. The suffering is so uncomfortable. Let's practice breathing. If you cannot recognize your own fear and anger, if you do not know how to calm yourself, how can you sit and wish for peace anyplace else? Keep listening. You can listen because you're already protected by the nectar of compassion in your heart. If you do not practice mindful breathing in order to keep that compassion alive, you too can lose your inner peace. Irritation and anger will come up. And certainly the other person will notice, maybe long before you do. If you look at their face, stay in your body. The antidote to violence and hatred is compassion. There is no other medicine. Looking deeply, we find out that not only do we suffer, but also the other person suffers. There is nobody not suffering in this. Once awareness is born, we know that punishment, violence, and war are not the answer. Violence cannot be ended by violence. The Buddha said, it's in the Dhammapada, responding to hatred with hatred can only increase hatred 1,000-fold. Only by responding to hatred with compassion and love can we disintegrate hatred. Without a spiritual dimension and practice, aren't we lucky? We're already here. We've already committed. This is our lives. We cannot really improve the situation of the world. We can come together as a family and as a Sangha in order to look deeply into our own situation and the situation of the world. And we can help each other. It's crazy out there. It's kind of crazy in here. I don't know how it is inside. If you really pay attention. Sometimes it's peaceful and wonderful and calm, and the world is beautiful. And lots of times there's fear and anger and anxiety and all kinds of stuff stirred up. But we just keep coming together and helping each other. Remember what's true. Practicing peace is possible with every step and with every breath. It is possible for us to practice together and bring hope and compassion into our daily lives and into the lives of our family, our community, our nation, and the world. I'm so happy to have Thich Nhat Hanh's coattails and wings to fly on. Okay, so we're going to try something and see what happens. You never know you're always trying something and you don't